So I decided to be positive for once and review something I respect. I reread and rewatched all the Harry Potters, and I'm confident to say that they still hold up. Even though I hold them in high regard, I will still criticize them in some aspects.
Previously on Docta Delicious.
I'm gonna make a Harry Potter review of the books and movies in one video.
I'm gonna make a Harry Potter review of the books and movies in one video.
Now, I said I wanted to do one big video on it, but that would take too long, especially when this one will most likely be the shortest. So I'm going to break my Harry Potter review into parts. Why? Well, I didn't want to hold off my Clone Wars Season 7 finale for too long. As you can see, I released this video first. Now I'll work on Clone Wars Season 7 finale, then go back to Harry Potter.
Let's do this.
I would have to say there's a lot more foreshadowing and details than I remembered when I first read it. The movie is directed very well by Christopher Columbus, and to this day is still good even when you take off the nostalgia glasses. I'm going to review the book, then the movie, and pick which one I think is better. Let's get on with it. There will be spoilers. In the beginning, the Dursleys, mostly Mr. Dursley, are seeing weird events happening around town, giving the reader a quick glimpse of the wizarding world through the Muggle's eyes. Starting off the book this way is smart because Mr. Dursley knows almost as much as us about the wizarding world as someone new to the series. Similar to The Hobbit, Bilbo Baggins doesn't know much more of Middle-earth compared to the reader. Obviously, Mr. Dursley's perspective is switched to Harry's in the next chapter, but Harry as well doesn't know anything about the wizarding world. It's a good way to give information early on with keeping it a mystery so the readers have a material to keep them invested in guessing. Due to the fact while everyone is asleep on Privet Drive, Dumbledore, McGonagall, and Hagrid come in and give the reader who, what, when, where, and why information about Harry. Hagrid mentions he is borrowing Sirius Black's bike, which is some nice foreshadowing. The reason why I'm highlighting this is because people on the internet were saying that she didn't do a good job planning ahead, even though I would say she did.
I'm just saying, it's very obvious when you can tell that she didn't plan ahead of time as well as she says she did.
Don't get me wrong, I wouldn't be surprised if she wavered off her original path a little bit, but she definitely was prudent. I'll bring up more examples throughout the video. Anyway, 10 years go by and we get to see Harry's abusive but comical life. The Dursleys are arguably the funniest characters throughout the series with all the crap they put Harry through. Whenever something strange or magical happened to no fault of his own, the Dursleys would punish him. It's hilarious about how biased they are to Dudley, who isn't special in any way besides being their son. On another note, I kinda appreciate the fact that the book mentions all the weird magical events happening around Harry with a sweater shrinking, flying on top of the roof, rapid hair growth, or the eventual glass disappearing. I know Harry ain't controlling this, but it is odd that this is the only time when magical events are randomly caused by him throughout the series. Well, except when Harry speaks Parseltongue. And when he blew up Aunt Marge. I'll give J.K. Rowling some leeway right here because the roof, haircut, and sweater incident happened some time ago. It didn't happen in the present when it was brought up in the chapter. I know this is small, but you never see any other wizards randomly fly up or shrink objects based on emotions. In the fourth one, when Ron gets his dress robes, they don't magically shrink because he doesn't want to wear them. I know someone might bring up that, hey, maybe Mrs. Weasley put a charm on it. The issue with that is, it was never explained. Fortunately, this is not enough to make him a Gary Stu because these previous events don't help him with his main goals. The main reason why I bring this up is because Harry Potter is accused of being a Gary Stu. For the most part, I disagree with that perspective, but it won't be the last time I'll bring this up in this video. After the debacle of Harry talking to a snake in the letters of acceptance, Uncle Vernon finds a remote place to avoid the letters. Once Hagrid comes barging into the place, he sees the Dursleys' behavior and decides to give Dudley a pig's tail. Hagrid definitely comes off as a little more rude in the book, which is fine for the most part. However, Hagrid has no clue how Dudley treats Harry, so why call him a lump and give him a tail? On top of that, he had the intentions to transfigure him into a pig. Not saying Dudley doesn't deserve to have bad things happen to him, but he didn't do anything that Hagrid saw. Extremely savage of Hagrid. For instance, his first line is him demanding tea. As it goes on, Harry leaves the shack and gets all his items from Diagon Alley while learning about the Wizarding World, which is another great reason why having a protagonist completely new to this. Harry meets Professor Quirrell, who is a good twist villain based on how his faux anxiety was played off. Especially when he's in a lot of scenes but he fades in the background. Not only that, he runs into Draco Malfoy at Madame Malcolm's and instantly dislikes him because he gives off vibes of Dudley. What makes this important is that this shows how Harry will consistently pick his friends and foes. When Harry gets his wand at Ollivander's, there's a ton of foreshadowing with how powerful Harry's wand is and how Hagrid got expelled. It seems as if this was planned out. When the end of August arrives, the Dursleys drop Harry at King's Cross while Vernon Dursley savagely leaves him there on his own and mocks him for there is no such thing as platform 9 3/4. This eventually leads to the Weasleys helping Harry get to the platform as all the Muggles are around. I know there is magic that can make it very difficult for Muggles to witness, but unfortunately that is not explained until the next installment. After Fred and George recognize Harry, they introduce Ron to him. I think this is an appropriate time to explain why Ron and Harry have good chemistry with each other. One of the similarities is that they are both underdogs that don't come from privileged backgrounds. When it comes to their family dynamic, Ron might not be abused as Harry is, but he is overshadowed by his other siblings. Bill, Charlie, and Percy were prefects and number one choices to keep that in mind, and extremely gifted in their studies. Bill worked at Gringotts Bank while Percy worked in the Ministry of Magic. Charlie was a Quidditch captain and studied dragons in Romania. Even though Fred and George blew off school, yes, in that way as well, they were very skilled in magic and opened a successful business. Ginny was an accomplished Quidditch player, while being the only female Weasley over multiple generations. Don't get me wrong, Ron was still good at Quidditch, he just wasn't as good as his siblings that played, and he was good at Wizard's Chess, but his abilities were definitely not well respected throughout his time at Hogwarts. Just how Harry never got his respect from the Dursleys. Both are brave, but for different reasons. Harry is because he lives a miserable life and he has nothing to lose, while Ron is because he wants to stand out from his other Weasley siblings. Harry needs Ron because he lacks fun, family, and a strong understanding of the magical world. On the other hand, Ron needs Harry because he lacks notoriety and a good sense of greater purpose. The best way to make characters have chemistry is by having similarities while supplying each other's needs. Eventually, Hermione and Neville come to their compartment and ask if they see Neville's missing toad, which they haven't. Hermione acts as an
insufferable know-it-all
that reminds them to get into their robes. Based on her behavior, she isn't accepted as Harry and Ron's friend yet. Which does make sense, but I will explain more about her eventual chemistry with the boys later. Once again, this shows how Harry picks his friends because he refuses to join them after Draco's pompous comments, even though he was being recruited. Once they get into the castle, they are introduced to the Sorting Hat and the different Hogwarts houses. What makes them so special is that she doesn't leave out a certain type of person. Anyone can be placed in the right house. Also, it's not necessarily based off of what your strengths are as a character, but more so what you desire in your character. Additionally, we get to hear some of the names of the characters who are going to be more important later on in the series. I know someone might object by saying, just because she named some characters that play more of a factor later on in the series, doesn't mean she had everything planned out. I will admit that it could be possible that she wavered off her original plan and or didn't have everything in her universe sorted out entirely. However, she does use these characters throughout the books before and after their main appearances, whether it's the Patel twins, Lavender Brown, Dean Thomas, etc. Around this time, we're introduced to the Ghost, most notoriously Nearly Headless Nick and Peeves the Poltergeist. Obviously, Nearly Headless Nick is the more important one over the books. Not saying Pease doesn't contribute, but he is more of a flat character and is treated more as a device than Nearly Headless Nick. He does contribute in this book by making Ron and Harry late for McGonagall's class by purposely pointing them in the wrong direction. However, Nearly Headless Nick has more character and is more of a contributor to the plot points and details throughout this series. Classes, I do appreciate how she wrote the professors. I'm only going to focus on the two most important, even though Professor Binns gives me a lull with his origin story. By making both McGonagall and Snape strict gives our heroes conflict to overcome. With Snape having a harsh bias against our heroes and favoriting some of their antagonists, while their own headmaster McGonagall being hard on them as well makes them have to go against a double-edged sword. When it comes to potions class, we get some really good foreshadowing with one of Snape's first lines. His famous quote, "Potter, what would I get if I added powdered root of asphodel to an infusion of wormwood?" Which is translated in the Victorian love language, "I bitterly regret Lily's death." Because asphodel is a type of lily that means my regrets follow you to the grave, while wormwood means bitter sorrow. It almost seems as if she planned things out. When it came to flying class, despite seeing the well-written exchange between Draco and Harry, I do find Harry to be overpowered with how good he is at flying. This legitimately has the best case of Harry being considered a Gary Stu. The fact that he's able to do extremely agile movements while being able to catch Neville's Remembrall on it is absurd. I get it that it is treated as an athleticism, and he was taught a little bit beforehand, but he was able to succeed in a situation applicable to Quidditch right away. In sports, you have to train a lot to be good. You can also train and still not be amazing at them. The only sports I can think of that you can naturally be good at without training are maybe short sprints and broad jumping, but those athletes still need to train a lot to be great. Now, I don't believe Harry's a Gary Stu, but I do think this could have been fixed by having a scene prior to this sequence where Harry goes out to play pickup Quidditch with Ron, Fred, and George. They give him the basics of how to use a broom and play, but he's bad at it at first. However, during the scrimmage, he progressively gets better and better. Then the whole sequence with Draco taking Neville's Remembrall plays out. On another note, I am fine with McGonagall allowing him to be a seeker even though he's a first year, because he is really good at it. Moving forward, Draco challenges Harry to a midnight duel, which he tries to use as a ploy to get him in trouble by tipping off Filch. This definitely makes Draco look cunning, which is a Slytherin trait. That also makes him more imposing, which won't be the last time, by the way. When Harry, Ron, Hermione, and Neville are being chased down by Filch in the corridor, I do prefer Neville being here because he tries to stop them later on. So him experiencing it gives him that motivation for his action that he will do later on. Moving onward to Quidditch, I do appreciate how suspenseful the writing is. She definitely keeps the reader's eyes glued to the book. However, I do find it odd that Quirrell and Voldemort were trying to kill Harry at this time. I guess if they succeeded, they could have covered it up well, but the chances of them succeeding are low. The fact that they might have not have had a ton of options to kill Harry at this point. After the troll instance in the bathroom, Hermione finally becomes friends with Harry and Ron. Not only did Hermione earn Harry and Ron's friendship for taking blame, but they felt bad for her crying over being made fun of by Ron, which almost killed her. Returning to the topic about chemistry, Hermione gets along with them because she is an underdog similar to them. Of course she values bravery. She is a know-it-all, tries to follow the rules to the best of her abilities, and a mudblood.
I don't think I've ever actually met a real-life Slytherin until
Docta Delicious.
like he's the wizard of being an asshole.
Oh, sorry. I should have said a non-pure blood. The most important and obvious part about her character is that she's extremely knowledgeable about school-related subjects, and she brings a level of caution, which are not the boys' strengths. Moving past how we learn where Hagrid got Fluffy, Norbert the Dragon from, Quirrell and Snape's quiver in the Forbidden Forest, it is strange that when Hermione and Harry are delivering Norbert to Charlie Weasley's friends, they forget their invisibility cloak. Technically, it is a believable mistake, but it's Harry's most important possession, and why wouldn't Hermione remind him? I'll give them some slack because they are 11 years old, but it's still dumb on their part. And they get caught. Stop! On top of that, partially the reason why Draco figured out their scheme was because Ron accidentally gave him his book, which had the letter in it while he was nursing Norbert's bite mark. Not gonna lie, that's pretty dumb. I will be a little more forgiving with it due to the fact that the protagonists were stupid, not the antagonists. The reason why is because a story is watching protagonists grow or fail to grow, and so that's why it's important for them to earn their goals. Even though Draco was caught earlier, it is enough to tip off McGonagall to catch the duo out of bed. When Harry, Neville, Hermione, and Draco are sent to the Forbidden Forest for detention, Harry is rescued from the Centaur Ferenz. This angered the Centaurs because the prophecy said that Harry would die in the Forbidden Forest, which is nice foreshadowing to the very last book of the series. Seems as if she planned it out. Once we get to the climax when they go through the trapdoor to stop Snape, they all contribute to getting through the stages. Since Hermione and Ron provided a lot of help for Harry in this situation, this is more evidence on why he's not a Gary Stu. On another note, I do find it ironic that these sections needed to be completed with first year spells. It's protecting a device that can give you immortality. Shouldn't it be guarded by more advanced spells as well? I understand that it takes much more than spells to get through this dungeon, but there should be a little bit better security. Even though they all contribute in the movie, they contribute more in the book by participating in more sections instead of being specialists in a specific one. Ron helps Hermione remember the spell to free them from the devil's snare, while they all get on broomsticks to get the key. Moving forward, I was okay with the troll being knocked out by the time they got there because they still had the potion riddle to solve. Not only that, it's explained why Dumbledore can't help them because he was talking to Nicholas Flamel about destroying the Sorcerer's Stone outside of Hogwarts. This is similar to The Hobbit on how Gandalf couldn't help the dwarves through the Mirkwood Forest due to him having to meet with the Wizards' Council to deal with the Necromancer. Once Harry defeats Quirrell and Voldemort, I am alright for how it plays out because he is 11 years young, while it does get explained afterwards by Dumbledore that Lily's love protected him. When Dumbledore visited Harry in the hospital, it's explained that Snape was actually protecting Harry, which will play a factor throughout the series. Then, the scene that always gets criticized, Dumbledore giving points to Gryffindor after the House Cup was over, instead beforehand, makes it seem rigged from the Slytherin perspective. I know JK did it to create some suspense at the end, but it just still seems stupid. The point should have been added right after Dumbledore learned about their heroics, instead of doing a last-second twist. Actually, it wasn't even last second. He did it after the competition was over. I will forgive it a bit simply because they were gonna get the points either way, and they did deserve them. Lastly, I do find it hilarious that Hagrid is encouraging Harry to do illegal magic right before he gets on the train. Then it ends at King's Cross. Overall, the book has some flaws to it, but they aren't the most egregious ones I've ever read. And this book certainly has some great world building, setup, and characters. So it's definitely a solid book. Now for the movie.
It's Dr. Michael Morbius hit your...
To start off, the actors don't look exactly like their characters in the books, but their personalities are portrayed well. I am aware Daniel Radcliffe acting isn't the strongest here, but he is a kid and his performance is still passable. You can tell he put some effort into it, but he was a little bit rough around the edges. Rupert Grint and Emma Watson were solid, but Harry Melling and Tom Felton had really good performances as their characters. The energy they're able to give off is really impressive.
36! Last year, I'm 37! All four of you will receive detention.
A lot of the adult actors are great and funny in the beginning, including Richard Griffiths, Fiona Shaw, and Robbie Coltrane. Especially Richard Griffiths' hilarious facial expressions. Fiona Shaw does a great job with how Petunia is so vitriolic towards Harry, while Robbie Coltrane definitely brings out Hagrid's flighty and rough side.
It's a baby, Harry, but you're a bit more along than I would have expected, particularly round the middle. Dry up, Dursley, you great...
I'll bring up more about the actors later. For Act 1, a lot of changes that they made compared to the book worked. Skipping over the Dursleys' weird magical occurrences was fine because the audience still gets enough information for the story. Plus, the zoo scene alone sufficed to show how Harry was magical. When all the letters are coming through the fireplace, Harry could just easily grab one of those letters off the floor. Either way, he would still need Hagrid to explain that he's a wizard and also to rescue him from the Dursleys. Additionally, it was fine that they cut out the montage of the Dursleys on the run. Also, having Harry celebrate his birthday was a nice touch. On top of that, I do appreciate the line change of having Hagrid apologizing for knocking down the door.
Sorry about that.
It makes him look more charming. It also brought out more humor in the scene. They also made him look better by giving Dudley a pig's tail after he noticed Dudley eating Harry's cake. It gives Hagrid more motivation behind his actions. Moving on to Act 2, the changes that they made to Quirrell's introduction is a little bit bittersweet. I do appreciate the foreshadowing of Quirrell being scared to shake Harry's hand because obviously if he touches him, he burns. Since Quirrell's facade is of him being a nervous Nelly, it would be a believable action of his character that he's trying to mask. The one downside of that is that it shows that Quirrell knew he couldn't physically touch Harry, yet he does in the end.
Touch.
I guess you can say it was just part of his act, but at the same time though, I can see why people can see that as him being stupid. The only other thing I'll comment about the Gringotts and the Hogwarts Express sequences were that they were good even with some of the changes because they just don't affect the plot negatively. Skipping towards the sorting hat ceremony, I do find it strange that the hat goes out of order and we only see 5 people get chosen. One of them is Susan Bones, who's not even that important. I do understand the importance of shortening the scene because a lot of students in the book play more of an importance in other installments compared to this one. It just doesn't make a whole lot of sense in that universe that there's only 5 people that even get highlighted. I guess they could have done a montage with how they did it with the wizard's chest scene, but that could have affected the pacing. I do find it funny that the hat doesn't even ponder his decision on Hermione being a Gryffindor. Not saying she doesn't belong there, but she easily could be a Ravenclaw, so that's why I think it would have made more sense if it pondered it longer. On a more positive note, I prefer the change of Ron saying Hagrid's line.
There's no witch or wizard who went bad who wasn't in Slytherin.
The timing is more relevant at this point in the ceremony than in Gringotts. Also, Ron is trying to make Draco look bad because Draco tried to recruit Harry, and Ron obviously wants to be friends with him. For the professors, Alan Rickman does a great job with Snape, but it is odd that Snape is 31 in the book while Rickman is 20 years older than the character. The only part that really bothered me about it is that he looks a little old in the face, but he deserved the role of Snape and I wouldn't want any other actor to portray him. His voice, demeanor, and to be honest, most of his look is spot on in the book.
Good luck today, Potter. Then again, now that you've proven yourself against a troll, a little game of Quidditch should be easy work for you. Even if it is against Slytherin.
However, the movie does make it up for Alan Rickman's age later on in the movie. When it comes to the dialogue in the movie, it's all good except for when Harry asks what spell Seamus is doing, while Seamus is clearly saying the spell out loud.
Into Rome. I, Rabbit, hurtling home. What's Seamus trying to do to that glass of water?
It's not the last line I will have a problem with. Not only is the dialogue good in this movie, sometimes it's better than the book.
Fine day, Sunday. In my opinion, best day of the week. Why is that, Dudley?
Because there's no post on Sundays.
Right you are, Harry. No post on Sunday. Ha! You're a wizard, Harry.
Did you see his face? Maybe if the fat lamb had given this a squeeze, he remember to warn us, fat ass.
Draco basically calls Neville a fat ass, which represents more of his bad boy image.
Our job is to make sure that you don't get blooded up too bad. Can't make any promises, of course. Rough game, Quidditch. Brutal.
Fred and George hyping up how rough Quidditch is resembles them more than them being supportive in the book.
Hey, look, everyone. It's the heir of Slytherin. Be careful. He's a seriously evil wizard.
Come on, Harry. Fred and George are just having a laugh.
On another note, I do prefer the change of making James Potter a seeker rather than a chaser in the book. This at least slightly justifies Harry's natural seeking abilities better by having it in his blood, due to the fact that the chaser and the seeker are two different positions. Thus, they require a different skill set. It does diminish the representation of the similarities and differences of the characters, because he does have some of James's virtues, but he contrasts in other ways too. However, I prefer substance over symbolism. Moving forward, the biggest change from the movies that made it worse was how the gang discovered Fluffy. They just conveniently come across Fluffy because of the magical staircase randomly took them there. Not only is it a coincidence, but it doesn't display Draco's cunning side. Anyway, right before the Quidditch match starts, there was some nice added humor by Wood.
I felt the same way before my first game.
What happened?
I don't really remember. I took a bludger to the head 2 minutes in. Woke up in hospital a week later.
However, I am not a fan of the dialogue of Lee Jordan explaining the rules during commentating.
Followed by the golden snitch. Remember, the snitch is worth 150 points. The seeker who catches the snitch ends the game.
Because it was already explained by Wood earlier,
You catch this, the game's over.
and no commentator would explain basic rules right before the match started. Not only that, I find it hilarious that Madam Hooch says she wants a nice clean game, yet the Slytherins are committing all these should be called penalties.
Now I want a nice, clean game. From all of you.
I don't mind the Slytherins playing dirty, but it's very obvious and clearly against the rules. It would make more sense if Snape were the ref due to his bias towards Slytherins. I will give the movie some slack because the pacing is good with having less stops during the game than they are in the book. They could have fixed this with making the Slytherins stealthy with their foul play. Plus, the movie canon is consistent with their direction of making it a rougher sport. Going on with the story, I do find it hilarious that Hagrid will blurt out important details that he shouldn't be saying to them.
No one gonna get past Fluffy. Ain't a soul knows how, except for me and Dumbledore. I shouldn't have told you that. I shouldn't have told you that.
It's funny, sure, but it makes Hagrid look very incompetent. I wonder if that will happen again. Even though this wasn't good writing, at least the heroes were being persistent with trying to get info out of him. When Harry discovers the Mirror of Erised, James Potter, played by Adrian Rollins, is in his 40s. That is closer to Rickman's age, who could also pass for being in his 40s. So in the movie canon, it's safe to say they were portrayed to be older, which is fine. Geraldine Somerville is much younger than both of them, being in her 30s, but you could argue that Lily is a younger looking 40-something-year-old in the movie. Or Snape and James age poorly, while Lily aged normally. I assume the mirror aged the characters as if they were alive with Harry in the present, because they definitely don't look as if they were in their early 20s when they died. Even though their ages are all over the place, it's still believable that they could be the same age. Back to the positives, the gang does earn a lot of clues on their way to solving the mystery of what Fluffy is guarding. Once they're at Hagrid's hut witnessing Norbert's birth, Draco tattles on them immediately. It doesn't make him as cunning, but it still makes sense and it doesn't hurt the writing. While at detention, I am fine with Firenze not foreshadowing with his centaurs Harry's death in the forest because it doesn't take away from the plot. After detention, with no surprise by anyone, Hagrid is dumb, yet again.
Take Fluffy, for example. Just play him a bit of music and he falls straight asleep. I shouldn't have told you that. Where you going? Where you...
Once Act 3 begins and they get past Fluffy, we get the Devil's Snare Room, which is worse here due to the fact that Ron is scared while Hermione was brave, which is not how their characters should be. In the book series, Ron is more brave than Hermione. That's his value as a friend to the group, particularly to Harry. It hurts the chemistry in the friend group because it's one of the reasons why Harry favors Ron over Hermione. It makes Harry look like a fool for trusting Ron over Hermione. Due to the fact that Ron's a major influence on how Harry goes about his decision making, Harry wouldn't be best friends with someone who's mostly comic relief. On top of that, they have a stock sound dinosaur roar from the Eyewitness movies when Ron is saved. Couldn't they make or find a more unique sound? Once they get to the room where they play Wizard's Chess, now Ron is showing his brave side. Even though it's better in the book, at least Harry, Ron, and Hermione all contributed to accomplishing each room. I do prefer how you see Voldemort's soul as the Black Phantom, which is an informative way to show that he is still alive. The ending is the same except for you don't get to see King Cross again, but that's fine. Everything that needed to be completed got completed. What's impressive is that it had a good tone and the humor didn't interfere with it, which is not easy to do.
Boy, I haven't seen you since you was a baby, Harry, but you're a bit more along than I would have expected, particularly round the middle. Turn around in the dungeon! Thought you ought to know.
Oh, good God, man, you're not still on about that bloody dragon, are you?
Norbert's gone. Dumbledore sent him off to Romania to live in a colony.
Well, that's good, isn't it? He'll be with his own kind.
Yeah, but what if he don't like Romania? What if the other dragons are mean to him? He's only a baby after all.
Oh, for God's sake, pull yourself together, man.
The musical score is another great masterpiece by John Williams. The genius behind Hedwig's Fight, aka the theme song, was designed to sound light because bird feathers are light and floaty. Unfortunately, but to no surprise, most of the CGI has aged.
Oh, hello there!
However, the practical effects still look good. Despite some of the less received movie changes, most of the changes worked and didn't ruin the plot. Overall, it's a solid movie. If I had to pick what's better, I would have to say the book because of its stronger plot and writing. Anyway, I got to get off the subplot and get on to the main plot.
No rules and walls. Laughing at you. Me. Ain't nobody coming this way, I see. Still told you so small to me. Talk so with my enemy. Watch for the cease. This right here is strategy. Every move you make it, I'm making three. Now you wanna leave roll on your knees. Laugh at this new opportunity. Focus on the boys that's trying to fight.
I'm just kidding.
Docta Delicious.
Sit your